Hello, and welcome back to our series about how to read your tongue. And today we're going to look at some of the patterns that you can see on your tongue that kind of take us way back into your history a little bit, that tell us a little bit more about the past than about the present. So these are not so much signs that you are going to monitor in order to try to shift them or change them in the hopes of helping to support your body moving into a healthier pattern. This is more about being able to offer yourself some self compassion and understanding because you can see the evidence of what your body has been through over time. So, this is all about how to read the cracks on your tongue. And I'm just going to give you a light touch with this. This is really a very deep subject and something that I think is probably best done working with a practitioner. But there are a couple of really good signs that I think you can get a hold of, even if you're just reading for yourself at home. So, this is a variation on a central crack down the middle of the tongue. And this is a pattern that can be called a heart stomach crack. And it can show up anywhere, sort of in this whole middle area of the tongue. And depending on exactly where it is, how deep it is, whether there's a coating inside it or not, it shows a little bit of a different version of the story. But in general, this is going to show up for people who have experienced a lot of stress, oftentimes early in their lives in childhood in some way. And sometimes it's present for people who experience childhood abuse and neglect, but a lot of times it's just present for people who are very acutely sensitive and who, as they experience the stress of childhood, even in a very loving or quote unquote normal family situation, they internalize that stress and tend to keep it to themselves and especially tend to internalize that stress in the digestive system. So, over time, what can happen is that this puts a lot of strain on the digestive system. And these are people who often experience psychosomatic manifestations of their stress. So, they're stressed and they don't feel like they're stressed out, but they get really bad stomach upset, or they get heartburn, or they have pain, or they have IBS, or those kinds of things that are very stress related. So this is a variation of that particular pattern. And again, we saw this tongue before when we looked at the scallops, but once again, we see a central crack. And this one is coming closer to the tip of the tongue. And this would tend to be a little bit more consistent with that, really intense emotional strain and stress, especially in childhood, and feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders as a kid. Whereas this tongue, the crack is a bit further back, and this would tend to suggest a bit more digestive involvement. Could definitely be some digestive involvement here, especially because we have those confirming signs of the scallops on the side. But because it reaches right toward the tip of the tongue where the heart is, this is one where we're really going to read this a lot as having to do with serious emotional stress during childhood. So here's another way that you might see some cracks. So these are horizontal cracks rather than that sort of long vertical crack. And I think of these almost like worry lines. So just as maybe if you imagine worry lines coming in on your forehead, these marks here show that there's just been some stress and some strain here in the center of the digestive system over a period of time. So this is not going to be necessarily an immediate kind of a sign. Like you can see the scallops here on the sides of her tongue. That might be talking to us about how her current diet is working for her or not. Um, and these are going to be signs of, past challenges. She also has a couple of little cracks here in the lung area, and that can relate to immunity, breathing problems, that kind of thing. And then lastly, just showing one more example of a very fine little crack that's sort of toward the center. Um, and this is a really good example of a nice bright red tongue tip. So the combination of these two signs would tell me that both, yes, there's current, very strong stress that's present, and there's a little bit of a history of internalizing some stress. And one thing that's important to do when you read this sign, I would have to ask her if she ever had a tongue piercing, because sometimes you can get a mark here or a little further back that's actually a scar from a tongue piercing. And if that's the reason for the crack, then that does not mean anything about your stress level. It just means that you pierced your tongue. So this is going to be our second to last video on tongue reading. And next time I'm going to read a couple of tongues for you and show you a bit more about how deep this can go when you work with somebody who is a professional. So this is going to be not so much to teach you all of the signs that I'm going to read, but to just give you a sense of what you might be able to learn if you work with somebody, and all of the things that your tongue can possibly reveal to you. So, of course, if you are interested in the possibility of working together and having me read your tongue for you, definitely visit me over at psycheandsoma.com. And I do have a tongue reading service available, and we can get together on Skype or on the phone, and you can send me your photos of your tongue, and I would be more than happy to meet you and to tell you a little bit more specifically and in depth exactly what it is that you can learn from your tongue. But until then, I will sign off for now, and I'll see you back for our final video in this series with some in-depth tongue readings that I hope will really open your mind and your eyes to the possibilities that are available here.